try to wing it. All right, I got Brother Masai here. I want to ask him a couple of questions. Man on the spot. Brother, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and your history, philosophy, and opinion on the best way forward.
Okay. My name is Masai ehehosi. I'm first and foremost a Muslim. I'm a citizen of the Republic of North Africa. I have a history of involvement with the New African Independence Movement. A former prisoner of war. I was captured in 1975. Spent about 14 years inside, along with a sister named Sophia Bakari, who also had a long history with the New African Independence Movement and the Black Panther Party. We had a comrade named Kambozi Armstead, also a citizen, a member of the BLA, and he was killed in 1975. And, okay, what's the rest of the question?
So that's history, your philosophy, and the best way forward for us as a people.
A simple answer would be like, I actually relate to land and independence for a lot of different reasons. And besides getting away from, or trying to get away from some of this direct oppression from, U.S. imperialism, I see it as important for the development of us as a New African people. I really can't speak to the best way forward for a lot of people. I think in a lot of ways for me it's like a process, and one of the things about land and even the struggle for it is like I see it as putting people in contact and doing some actual work. And along the course of doing that work, or during the course of doing that work, I think like best way forward in a lot of ways it will change. I mean, some people will drop in, some people will drop out. Even for me, it's like I wasn't a Muslim when I first started. Anything I do now, I actually see it as it needs to be along with whatever Allah has decreed. And as a Muslim, one of the things I see about land is a place to develop in an atmosphere that's not as oppressive as this, both along with other Muslims and with others who aren't New Africans.
What about New Africans that ain't Muslims?
That's what I said, along with New Africans who aren't Muslims.
Oh, okay.
But land gives us a chance to be in some kind of proximity, and whether we know it or not, this oppression, it has a way of messing with our mind, even the way we relate to each other. And I think a lot of us actually we do know it because we say it. Sometimes some people express struggle now in such a way like that aspect kind of goes away, which is why I was saying it ain't about getting away from white folks, it ain't about getting a lot of away from a lot of their ways. Not as simple as that, It's about being in an environment where we can better develop as a people.
Okay, that's good. We hear that you were in Flint, Michigan. What did you think of the experience? What did you see?
Okay, I was there with a brother named Eddie Conway with the Real News Network was interviewing. He interviewed the mayor. He did some interviews with some people in the street, and he also did a pretty lengthy interview with an imam out there in one of the masjids. Even though I had heard about the situation in Flint in the water, it was like listening to the mayor. It was like it was like real moving, because again, it was like this was a person talking, and it really had a real human feel about it. Now, one of the things that came up a few times was like when people talk about genocide against a people, because they're talking about a basic need like water, and the water thing had been this was a long-term problem. Other people actually knew it before a lot of the people that lived in the city. And it's like, when you think about the fact that they knew that this stuff was killing people, and the mayor talked about, one of the things that came up was like the trust that the people could have in any governmental body. It's not like a lot of times, especially for New African, that we have a lot of faith, but when they consistently lied about something like that would affect not only those people who were already alive, but their children, it's like, it can't help but destroy faith. I mean, like for a long time, even when people was talking about the color of the water, the taste of the water, they were being reassured by the federal government that everything was all right. From what I understand now, it's like she thinks that, like, they got somewhat of a handle on it and things have started to turn around. But then, as you may know, it's like the federal government has decided not to supply bottled water. That was one of the things that actually came up in the conversation with a lot of people, that even folks out on the street knew that for a lot of basic needs, they really needed to use the bottled water. It's like what was coming through the taps wasn't no good. So, I mean, to have someone else tell you that you're all right and you know it's not, it's like, it just says a lot about what that government thinks about the people. I do think that the city government in Flint, though, is trying the best that they can to help the people. I mean, the mayor talked about different community groups that have donated water to give out to the people, how different institutions have even opened their doors as distribution center, how some major companies, and I'm not going to mention them because I may miss some, and that wouldn't be right. But some of the major corporations have actually stepped up for whatever reason in that regard. And she said, like, they're supplying water to try to make up for some of the things that the federal government has stopped providing. They talked about the fact that the pipes, and I don't know how to express it exactly in the technical terms, but like the corrosion and the lead and all those things that was coming through the pipes, that a lot of that needed to be replaced. And again, some of it has been replaced. And she didn't, I don't remember her exactly saying it, but like a lot of progress that they have made, it seems like if that would go back, it can't help but be set back. It's like, when you start fixing something and then don't fix it all the way, and it's like, it seems like we let the rot come back in again. But they have fixed a lot of the infrastructure. I forgot how much money they spent and how much more money is needed. I think they received a grant to do some more work. But her attitude, some other people in the city government, and the people in the city, it was like a good spirit, at least around that. But the genocidal aspects, you can't help but see it. The long-term effects, and that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not just the lives of the people who are alive now, but like for pregnant women, because they don't know how far back how far back it goes and how far forward it would go. This is something that sometimes people do talk about, but usually in the specialized field they in. But she mentioned about like the effect on that water in terms of like some of the youth and their behavior, and that would help and not definitely ain't justifying the brutality of their so-called criminal justice system, but like the effect that water would have on the brains of some of the youth and lead them into situations where they have increased contact with that system. Some of the antisocial behavior that we express or manifest within our own group because of what people have been drinking, So, and I hadn't heard that much, I hadn't heard that really expressed in a lot of general conversations like she did. So it seemed like she thought about every aspect of how that water really affects us in the ways a lot of times we don't think about. And something I hadn't quite heard about or thought about before, she mentioned about even when people just say things like boiling the water, that didn't help the situation in many cases. In many cases, it made it worse because then you release certain fumes into the air that people were now breathing. Yeah, that's usually the simplistic thing. Boil the water and do whatever, but that's not a solution. But while she was talking, I was thinking,
use the right lane to keep right to merge onto Tri-State
Flint
South toward Indiana.
Isn't actually the only city I heard about with that problem. Flint might have been like, in some ways, more the more recent ones I've heard about the water. But I've heard of reports throughout the U.S. And again, it's primarily poor communities, people of color that have been affected. Leading to all kinds of situations, birth defects, and we see a government that hasn't really stepped up. It was pointed out that they got a little bit more under that previous federal administration, under the Obama administration, than they are getting now. But that seems to be across the board with a lot of things. And again, I'm not raising up the Obama administration in a lot of areas, but some things was a little bit different for people, at least what they can see, as compared to a lot of the pullbacks now with this administration.
Oh, wow.
And I got to ask this too, because along with the Flint thing and the water, the poisoning, one of the things that came out with some other people who I had been talking to is that the increasing privatization of water supplies throughout the U.S. You have government entities basically selling resources that belong to the people to the highest bidder. In return, once they control the water, people are losing houses because they can't pay exorbitant water bills. Of course, people can't help but suffer when they can't get water.
Yeah.
But again, you're selling natural resources, and in a lot of cases, people are kind of sleeping on it. By the time they find out that something has happened or is happening, it has already been put into effect. So I think we really, really need to look at that. That privatization.
That's a real good point, brother. Privatization, huh? Okay. Very good. You have anything else to say about that topic? Flint, Michigan, and the water? Did you drink water while you was there?
Actually, the only water I drank there was bottled.
Yeah.
And I should say this too, because it was real interesting for people who were there. A lot of people, it's an automatic thing not to drink water from a certain supply. For me, it was I didn't really think about it like that. So somebody might point out, don't use that water, don't do this and that. Normally I don't drink that kind of bottled, that water anyway.
Tap water. Yeah.
Right, but sometimes it's a thing where you might be there, you're a little thirsty and you reach for it. And again, it ain't just the drinking, it's the bathing and everything else.
Wow.
So again, I people there will make you aware of the fact that you got to be careful.
What? Can't do nothing with that water, huh? Wow. Okay. As a former POW, what can you tell us about your process of reentry and continuing to struggle for the independence of New African people?
Okay. I think I was... one of the things, my reentry was compared to a lot of people, it was, I have to say, it was kind of much more smooth. It was smoother than a lot of people. And something that I was thankful for is that when I was released, or even while I was in there, it wasn't a thing where I had to express remorse for any criminal activity. Actually, it was very few times that it was even expressed as criminal activity. And I think about that because a lot of prisoners, it's when they go off for parole, it's the state want them to say something, so it becomes how do you word it where, you acknowledge some things, you may say you won't do certain things again, but how do you do that in such a way where you don't renounce struggle, or because they'll try to put you in that position, that whole remorse thing. I never had to do that. As a matter of fact, one of my turn downs, because I got turned down 5 times, was because they felt like, how did they put it? That my ideas on revolutionary violence meant that I would never be able to adopt to the rules of parole. And I mean, I got turned down, but that's better than them asking me to say like my ideas on criminal activities or, my criminal behavior meant I wasn't.
Oh, so they actually addressed revolutionary violence?
Yeah, I got turned down for that. And what I told them, what do you mean? Because actually, it wasn't supposed to be a turn down for my ideas, maybe, for my activities or practice. But yeah, they turned me down for my ideas on revolutionary violence. At another time, when they were asking me certain questions, they asked me, because they could also have the general conditions, but then special conditions. And one of the special conditions they asked me about was, they said like that they may tell me that I couldn't be involved in political activities no more. And I said, what do you mean by that? And they said, well, like they used an example, if I had been a member of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, and maybe I had embezzled funds while engaged in those activities, they may tell me I couldn't be involved in that anymore. Mm-hmm. But I said that wasn't my politics, the Democratic or Republican Party. I asked them to put it in writing exactly what they mean so I could take it back and have my lawyers look over it. But they never put it in writing, and they didn't come back with that one. Mm-hmm. So again, I feel like compared to a lot of people, how do you word it? How do you say it? And because consistently while I was in there, Safi and myself, we had raised the issue that because we were citizens of the Republic of New Africa and members of an armed formation of Black Liberation, that their state courts had no right to try us. And if anything, it was supposed to be held in federal courts in accordance with international law. Yeah. Of course, we didn't get that done, but it was like consistently, my thing, I had always tied it to POW status, prisoner of war status in a real sense, and the relationship of the U.S. with forces fighting for liberation. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a lot of change for me in regards to talking to the parole. So when I got out, and I can't say I had no big support network because I didn't, but I do have to acknowledge the support of like the Spear and Shield Collective, which was a source of support both while I was inside and initially when I got out, because that was a collective of conscious New Africans, which made a difference. Because and I still maintain the whole dynamics behind the independence movement and what folks call the Black movement, whatever. It's kind of like different. African Americans, especially American African Americans, they're different than New Africans. I wasn't about integration, so it was important to have a base of support that could support, but at the same time not be trying to steer you towards activities that ain't related to independence. So again, my re-entry was different. Like I said, it was 5. I got turned down 5 times. And the last time when they did finally grant me parole, I think it was about 4 or 5 months before I got out. And one of the times we found that one of the holdups is that I was told at one time that the reason why they couldn't release me is because one of my sisters had said that where I was going, me and my brother didn't get along, and my older brother didn't get along, and there would be fights, so the family didn't really want me out. And I should say, even though I knew about some of the things that COINTELPRO was capable of doing and the state was doing, in the sense of trying to cause fiction, even though I knew that my family supported me because they had even helped with trying to get lawyers and whatever, right. When they bring it to you, it's like sometimes they can plant this little seed. Maybe my family is working against me, or maybe some members are. It was that kind of a thing. Of course, but one of the things that made me question is that where I was going, I didn't have a brother that lived there. And like I said, knowing that certain people in my family had put up money to do certain things, that made no sense neither. So after a while, that story changed, and then it came out the reason why they wasn't gonna let me go where I initially wanted to go, which was North Carolina, because by that time my mother was there, was that because people in North Carolina had said they had their own radicals and they didn't need me to come there. And so I couldn't. That kind of hurt me because since I had been in, my family had, well, at least my mother and them had moved south, and I had a sister who had died, and she had 2 children, and my thought was that I could go down there and help my mother with them, and so that did kind of mess with me not being able to go there. I did get released to a sister that was in Virginia though, and which, since I was in Virginia, they really couldn't turn that down. And I eventually got transferred back to New Jersey. New Jersey also didn't really have a choice about it because I was born in New Jersey, and that was the last known residence they had. Now, the funny thing about it is that even though other places had been careful about who would take me and who wouldn't, they actually approved my parole to a brother named Breeze Barrow. Breeze was heavily involved with the Black Panther Party. Breeze Barrow.
Breeze. Okay.
They approved my parole to Breeze, who was heavily involved in the struggle, so that helped too. But and so I got approved to New Jersey. I went up there and stayed with a Breeze. And so
so that's good. So you had a place to parole to, and
had a place to parole to.
But did they ask you for to have a job offer and all that stuff?
They did, but I didn't, especially since they shifted me up there. I think I might have had some letters where people said they would help me with a job. Now related to that is that after I got out, there was some program I hooked up with, and they got me a job working in a hotel in New York. I mean, of course, it was very exploitive and stuff, but they were also one of them places where, like, people who hired me along with some other people, they got the little tax credit for helping your high-risk people. And I found out a lot of rackets behind that, because sometimes they would hire you as long as the credit was there, and then when the credit was gone, they would put you out. But what happened was when I got there, this habit of mine came out of speaking out against conditions, and they had a union that was basically controlled by the company. It wasn't really benefiting the worker. I mean, myself, because I had that little record, and then they had people who didn't speak English or didn't speak it that well. And I'm not saying this against them, but I am saying they were being exploited and people couldn't really do nothing. I had raised certain concerns a few times, so it's not like management super liked me. They didn't dislike me, but they didn't super like me. The union didn't super like me. After I had been there for about a year, I was eligible for my first vacation. I mean, this was the first vacation I had like in years, because I was inside, and I don't know what you can call not working inside a vacation. But I had a vacation, but what had happened was when I first got out, my parole officer wasn't required to tell my employer that I was on parole and what my charge was. New Jersey had changed the law, and if in fact you had something involving violence or weapons, and I had a charge involving both of them, that the parole officer had to tell the employer. And I gotta say, my parole officer actually, he tried to get a waiver from the state so he wouldn't have to tell them. Because a lot of people know once you give up certain information about your past, that's like a kiss of death. So they wouldn't approve the waiver, so he had to tell. And some kind of way I ended up not going back to the company. I forgot how it played out. Because one of the things they would say is like, you lied on the application. Even though, people might have hired you before because of the credit, it didn't mean the company necessarily knew certain things about you. So whichever way they played. But because I had lied and I wasn't expecting a lot of help from the union, I was gone. So much for that.
What you lied about, the conviction?
Yeah, I forgot how I answered it. Well, I maybe I didn't tell a complete truth about it, something like that. So which is why I support those campaigns being waged by people who like to ban the box.
Right. Yeah, ban the box is a good campaign.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I support those things.
Yeah. Well, in connection with that, so knowing what you went through when you came home, what do you think about how the conditions out here for guys and women that come home now, especially after a bit more than 5 years, bits of more than 5, 10 years. What kinds of things do you see lacking, and what kinds of things do you think that we on the streets are doing well as far as welcoming home? I guess probably just being happy they out.
Well, okay, and I gotta say this a little bit. Sometimes I periodically say I strongly dislike the empire. I dislike the changes it takes people through inside. I dislike the things that take people through that even leads to a lot of people going inside, whether it's people, trying to escape through the use of a lot of drugs and alcohol and getting into antisocial behavior, or whether it's folks, being forced in a lot of ways to get involved with crimes of economic or activities for economic necessity. I hate what the empire does to people. I hate the way it strips away a lot of humanity and people's self-respect. Mm-hmm. Having said that, it's like when people come out here, it's like, and I know people be glad to get out and whatever, but I mean, like, a lot of times people are thrown into the same conditions where, like, a wage that ain't even can't even be called anything close to a living wage, mm-hmm. conditions that ain't designed to help a person as a human being. I just think so much needs to be done. Like I said, one of them is like completely changing the relationship between human beings and that society they are part of. I don't know whether I should say like things like bring down the empire, but that's for folks who, part of the empire. My thing is still the land of independence. I don't know whether I could say that anything in particular people out here are doing to help people inside. I think they need to have a better understanding of really not just inside the prison, but the overall nature of capitalist society. Mm-hmm. I know that there was a lot of people in, and there's still a lot of people down who actually benefit off of some of them programs. I don't know whether you want to call them, what's that, part of the non-profit industrial complex, or in many cases, they're still part of the prison industrial complex. Mm-hmm. If in fact somebody is on paper, for an example, a lot of those activities people are engaged as part of the prison industrial complex, so they may struggle for reform, but they don't necessarily get involved with struggle to change the system. I mean, you eliminate their reason for being or their income when you do that. So it's like, yeah, we know the system is bad, but we ain't really pushing for nothing that totally changes it. I think, like, one of the things I disliked then was use of the term, like, offender. Mm-hmm. Now, that was one of the things when I got out there. Was a few places where I go to, you have to sign papers as an ex-offender, even among folks who say they mean well, because that word just burns. In my case, particularly, because I was thinking about other folks who, who did we offend? We didn't offend the masses of the people who might have offended the oppressor. Right. But, so when you tell me that, I keep putting down this offender and ex-offender, I disliked it then, dislike it now. I think people doing that line of work that supposedly help people come out need to be looking at their choice of words. And again, a lot of times that goes back to how they even view the empire itself. But when people get out, again, it's like we have to accept a lot of things sometimes, or we at least we think we do, in order to maintain that status outside.
And we've done a lot of work over the years as far as raising the consciousness, especially the New African consciousness of a lot of people inside have become citizens, have become New Africans inside. What kinds of things should be done, especially for those particular persons who have a conscious engagement with the struggle for liberation, land independence, socialism?
What? If I go back to the land and independence thing, I think that some of us that talk and say we believe in independence, we need to really be struggling to develop some type of institutions actually across the board. Mm-hmm. Both for people who are coming out and, as you say, may have had their consciousness has been raised, or them becoming conscious of the whole independence movement. I think we need to develop those kind of things for them to be able to go to, and actually not just them, but their families, because a lot of times, because they've had this sense of awareness of the New African independence movement or the right to independence. Mm-hmm. It's like they don't necessarily have assistance for themselves or assistance in even to explaining to their family members what they're talking about. And assistance not just with words, but institutions even for them, which is where I go back to, like, development things, particularly on the land. And not just for people who don't know, when we talk about, like, the specific land of, like, the independence movement, we talk about what they call the 5 states of the Deep South, or Georgia, South Carolina, Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi. I think that in those areas, particularly where we had that strong New African population, we need to be doing things like development housing. We need to be doing those things to stop, with the housing or resources we do have short of independence. We need to stop them from falling into the hands of that capitalist ruling class, and start converting some of those resources into places where we can move families. It's not like we, for a lot of people, like, we lose a lot from getting away from cities. I understand, like, they have certain stores, but we don't have funds to buy anything there. We don't have housing, which is like, you can see some places where, like, there's tons of abandoned buildings, and but we don't have any. I support things like even taking over buildings, actually, but that, that's coordinated with people who got some of those legal skills. And of course, people who are on parole can't get involved in those activities. Mm-hmm. But when we have places like on what we call the territory, where we're trying to work for complete sovereignty, it's like, I think we need to be, those people outside that can need to be stepping up their work on that, because that in turn helps prisoners, their families, former prisoners. It helps us all. And we got an environment that, like, conducive to somebody developing as a human being. We do tell people, don't think about coming with all the super bad habits. It's an environment. We try to work you to get over some of the issues you have. But we ain't talking about duplicating what they have here in the U.S. But but across the board, we need agencies, counseling to help people get together. Things helping to deal with domestic abuse. And when people have been confined inside for a long time, there is a lot that they lose. Even, in interaction with other people, there is a sense of time. Sometimes there is a thing where, like, they can be abusive. And we have to acknowledge some of the problems that we have. And we really have to address it, deal with it.
Well, no, that's something that, you probably can speak on it from both sides of it, as being like I understand you're a Vietnam veteran and also a BLA veteran. Safia used to speak about, and just a veteran of, the wars against New Africans since we've been here. She used to talk a lot about, the PTSD syndrome and how it was manifested, especially in movement and people who was involved in the party and in blah. What do you think about that?
I don't know how much I can address. I think the post-traumatic stress syndrome is, people that was involved in formations like the BLA, other armed formations, is there. And that's another of them things. Is not only, even when we speak of it, we haven't really developed any mechanism to really deal with it. a lot of times here, like when I talk to some other folks that I know that's been involved, we can't even publicly say what we've been involved with. So it adds to it. We may have sessions among ourselves, but we can't openly say certain things.
Right.
You know, we can't even share experiences. We can't share, at least not openly.
Right.
You know, why we may feel certain ways. Even when I was talking, like, and like I said, because I being with people like Eddie, because I had been with him for lately quite a bit. It's like some of the same people we may know, and some of the people we know, like, that's gone, and why they're gone.
Right.
So it's those things. Maybe with him and some other folks in other areas, I can have conversations with them, and there's a thing we can understand, but we can't say certain things.
Right.
I think that adds to it. But when you mention that, though, it's like those are the kind of things sometimes we don't tend to think about it on a very real professional level. You know, like I said, sometimes we can't really talk about it too much, but even when we do, we tend to dismiss it. We tend to think of a lot of stuff as this conversation that white folks supposed to have. And I don't know where this would fit in the conversation, but I also think about this is that at a period of time, it's like I know, like a lot of my children, they didn't salute the U.S. flag, and even though there might have been questions and some things like that, they weren't disrespectful for us folks, but they didn't salute, and they could articulate why.
Right.
But it was sometimes in an environment where, like, it might be a few times we could talk to a teacher or whatever, and it was cool. I look at the environment now, and it's like those folks in the U.S. forces, it's like these are superheroes, and so, like, you know, when we look at, like, the way they treat, like, professional athletes who don't want to salute the flag and what it represents, really, it's like when the pressure they got. Just imagine, like, young children coming up now.
Right.
The pressure, if they even attempt to do it. So it's like that whole society conditioned them that these folks are the heroes and whatever. Don't even think about raising anything else, because in fact, it's you're almost anti-human. And you got to think about the pressure that really is on a child. I know you and I, when we talked earlier today about the number of, like, were Africans sent to school or new Africans sent to school there, and you know, there is a need to better coordinate both what they do and how the people, public understand them. But we don't really have enough of them. We don't have the environment where a person can be, you know, they can express who they are and what we went through as a people.
Grow up being comfortable with that, and it's natural to sit down to not salute the U.S. rag.
Right, and really talk about the history, what it means to oppress people.
Right.
And even when I say African-centered, sometimes even African-centered could be a whole lot different than new African-centered, because if you got people from the continent, they may have a different feeling. They're African descendants, but their relationship to the U.S. oppressor is different. And some cases, for whatever reason, some people may have voluntarily came here. New Africans, for the most part, when we talk about it, these are people who didn't descend from people who made a choice to be here. You know, this doesn't represent the land of opportunity. We may say that sometimes, or we may say we're better compared to somebody else, but we got to think about that. You know, are we really, when we done lost our mind, when we look at the number of people that we have locked away in their dungeons, I mean, people that we don't even know about, we just think it's kind of natural for whole families, whole generations to be raised in prison. And again, we acknowledge that folks did some stuff, but we also look at, like, you know, when you put people in certain conditions, you already know what they're going to do. Yeah. You know, so you know, and breaking up whole generations of family doesn't make it better for us, for New Africans. So again, that flag doesn't represent that, you know, for us. I mean, a lot of times while they was having us hanging from the tree, they was waving the flag. You know, God bless America. And so for a lot of, like I said, for New Africans, it's like, you know, we've lost our mind when we keep saluting this, but at the same time, we look down at those things that are part of us. So when we look at how those children are being conditioned now, in many cases, if they don't overtly express a dislike of themselves, they're conditioned to do it by accepting the oppressor. Which, and as far as in related to that, I
gotta say, Go ahead.
Okay, I just gotta say, cause like even like that whole thing about these troops that come back and stuff, and even some New Africans don't like us to knock it. I mean, you be talking about people who went somewhere to kill somebody else,
Right.
and we still ain't got nothing here. And in the 60s or 70s, a lot of times we would address that. You look at people who talk about, how they love Muhammad Ali now. A lot of people didn't, especially the oppressor nation. They didn't like him when he said he ain't going to Vietnam. What he said in the Vietnam, Viet Cong ain't.
Ever call me nigga?
Nick, call him nigga. But now we act like we like him, but at the same time we be glorifying practices to kill somebody else who might be fighting in many cases to overturn conditions that we live under. And in some people, I don't know where they get this glowing patriotism thing where they think they got to do it. But for a lot of people, we got to call it for what it is. It's a source of income.
Yeah.
Even when I went, it was like, let me get away from the community. And by that time, I had actually been beat up and locked out by them twice, by their system twice. So I already knew. And I went into that early age, 17. But it was one of them things, like a lot of people get away from the community. I mean, learn certain skills. And some of the people I met, I liked. But the institution itself, when I think about it for real, was like, nah, I'm going to do it for money. And that's what I think we need to look at. A lot of these people, not knocking them, but this ain't no super thing. But you're going to kill people. You got some of the most advanced military equipment on the face of the world, in the history of the world. And a lot of times killing people from a distance, and you don't know why. I mean, you got people now talking about they, like when the U.S. did what they did to Iraq. No weapon of mass destruction. You're over there, you destroy and destabilize certain things, and then somebody come back and say that you went to fight for my freedom, and I should be thankful. You didn't fight for my freedom. You might have went for a job, and you still don't know what you did. You done created a bunch of enemies in many cases. But I can pick up a weapon to go somewhere else and kill somebody that ain't did nothing to me, and we go back to a thing like, I can't even get decent drink of water for me and my family here. I gotta be out of my mind. So I just gotta say that again. It's like, and even though I say that thing, it's not like I'm talking about the people, but in some cases, I am. Because some of them don't know no better, and some of them don't want to know any better. They just are proud. I went to do it. They fought for our freedom. If you listen more and more, you hear that. I gotta say, like George has said, like George Jackson has said, understand the reality fascism is already here. And of course they killed George in prison. And then we look at people like Imam Jamil Amin, formerly H. Brown. One of the things he had said in one of his books is that fascism is going to come to America, and they're going to call it patriotism. And that's what we see now, this super patriot thing. You see people, patriotic thing, you see people accepting some stuff, both the repression of themselves, or usually they like the oppression of those who have less than them in the U.S., and the oppression of others, and they're willing to accept a lot of stuff for the maintenance of the empire. But they get old.
Revolution by the book, or
Revolution by the book. Yep.
Okay.
So, and y'all should check out the book and check out Imam Jamil Amin. Rap Brown was cool, but Imam Jamil Amin is even like more, because I mean he doesn't fear anyone or anything but Allah. Very nice, humble brother, definitely still concerned about the plight of the oppressed masses here and throughout the world. But if he didn't fear the oppressor before, I mean, so much so that, they wrote a law for him, H.R. Brown, to forbid you from going across state lines to basically talk to New Africans.
Right.
If they didn't like him then, they don't like him now when, he don't fear nothing but Allah.
Yeah.
But you need to check him out. They got him locked up over there.
He's still in Florence?
No. He been removed from Florence, and that was, as a result of waging of intense campaign. His family have organized. It's called Jericho Amnesty Movement for Political Prisoners was involved. But we pushed to get him out of there because of medical conditions. Some help from the members of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
actually, and some people help and people know about it, and some help and people don't know about it. But we can't get the Congressional Black Caucus to support prisoners in general, political, POWs, or anything else.
Right.
You know, as you know, we can't get them to even speak on certain things. Imam Jamil, some kind of felt like they felt the pressure where they had to, but he was removed from Florence, but he was also removed with, with severe physical health problems. He was moved after that. I think he was moved up to New Canaan, Pennsylvania. He was in a prison there.
New Canaan,
and that was a prison that seemed to have stayed on lockup quite a bit. And one of the things we had found out on one instance where we hadn't heard from him in a while on the outside, it was actually another new African captured combatant, a brother named Kojo Bamani, who actually sent word out to somebody in Jericho that we needed to, step up to work and find out what had happened with Imam Jamil, because he had seen him there, and he was talking about his face all swollen and whatever. And Imam Jamil doesn't complain about a lot of stuff. When he speaks on something, it's real bad. But he was all swollen and messed up. He got some medical treatment again as a result of the push. Then he was transferred from there to Tucson, Arizona. And he needed to be. They did acknowledge that he needed to be in a warmer climate. But the thing about Arizona is that it's not near to the family, which interferes with not only the communications with the family, but even work around his legal case. So
Georgia's warmer.
Georgia's warmer, and the thing is, I think he would like to be in Georgia. What happens is and that's the thing too, because he's a state prisoner, but under interstate compact with the agreement with Georgia's one of the states. It has an interstate compact agreement with the federal government. So Imam Jamil was transferred into federal custody. So when you bring up Georgia, Georgia state prisons may be a place he could go to. The federal prison in Georgia, though, what I understand, isn't quite equipped medically for him to be at.
In Atlanta?
Oh, yeah, right.
In Atlanta?
Yeah, it's in Atlanta.
It ain't equipped, huh?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we have been told. It wouldn't provide the same services. I don't know that Tucson is a whole lot better. But he would rather be there. But again, if we could get him back in the state custody, actually, that may work out better. But he wants to go there, or he's trying to go. I think it's a place in Mississippi. But
okay, well that's a good update on Imam Jamil.
And like I also mentioned, Brother Kojo.
Man.
He's another one of them prisoners that people don't know. Kojo was another one. He became a Muslim after he was in there, but Kojo was a soldier in the BLA.
Yeah.
He's long term, and he's also like they did that interstate compact thing with him. He's another one that could use some assistance, So it'd be good.
Is he still in New Canaan?
I believe he is. The Jericho website would be a good place for people to find out his contact information, because he has severe medical issues too, as a lot of prisoners do.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Kojo do also. There's a number of prisoners who actually have severe medical problems. I was also talking to somebody else again today about some of the campaigns to deal with aging prisoners.
Yeah.
And a lot of times aging prisoners, along with age period, comes some medical problems that they have.
Right.
And as they get up in age, it also means any family members they had have either passed away or they're not in super shape to travel these long distances to see them. And as you may know, in some cases, there's some states or some prisons that come up with rules where you can't visit somebody unless you knew them before you went in. Well, if I'm up there in age, damn near everybody I knew is dead. Yeah. So you're basically, telling me I'm not going to have any visit.
Right.
But Jericho website, and I should mention this too, because when I talked earlier about even like the prison industrial complex, I'm also a member of Critical Resistance. Critical Resistance is a formation dedicated to or committed to developing a movement to abolish the prison industrial complex. Not to improve it, not to reform it, but the total abolition of the prison industrial complex. So I would suggest that people look at
Look into that too. Huh?
look at the website. You know, and PIC abolition is deeper than, you know, just a thing like let's close down the prison. It ain't like we ain't aware of other things that's attached. We're very much aware of those other things. You know, how do we address harm, and that's what we seek to get people to do. You know, how to seriously look at ways to prevent harm and what is harm to different people. A lot of that does involve conversation, because what in fact may harm me mentally and physically may not be the same thing that harm you. If I don't talk to you and you don't let me know, I don't know. I may in fact be doing some things that's good for me and those I know, but not knowing that what I'm doing is actually adding to your oppression. So it's not a simple thing, you know, and abolishing it calls for more than slogans. But yes, I am one of the founding members of Critical Resistance. So
you one of the founding members of Critical Resistance?
I am actually, the first conference was actually held on the West Coast. Angela Davis, Ruthie Gilmore, some other folks, you know, they had actually pulled together the conference on the East, on the West Coast. I think it was '98, and it was so well received that a bunch of people got together on the East Coast a few years later and talked about how we could do something for the Northeast. That, and some of the people that was involved in the founding on the East Coast, you know, like Kai and Shanti, and so along with, like, we had some space from people like the American Defense Service Committee that allowed us to meet. So we had a few organizing meetings from some people in the Northeast. People from the West Coast came out, like Rose Braz, who passed away. She was a beautiful person too. They came out from the West Coast and worked with us. You know, Cassandra, Sheila, they came out from the West Coast and helped us put together something. So we put together the Critical Resistance Northeast. And what happened? Even while we was developing Northeast, it was like interest expressed in the South to having a conference down there. And while we was developing it, it was like the thought was thrown out there, maybe we need to develop some type of organizational structure. So we had some meetings, what I kind of call going to the mountains. I forgot where we went, but we had a retreat and got together to talk about how we would form the structure. And a lot of work went into that because we didn't want a top-down thing. We wanted something that was still directly connected to the people. So we formed the interim national organizing body, and then after that we went ahead. After, you know, a whole lot of back and forth with people and trying to get consensus, we formed the national organizing body for Critical Resistance. I think we started with just one staff member at that time, and that was Rose, because again we didn't want to have that kind of structure. Later on we saw the need, but we had to have a little bit more of a permanent national staff people, so we ended up with 3. We also have a thing where staff people can only be in that position for a certain number of years, then they have to rotate off. That's to help try to prevent a stagnation thing. You know, after a certain amount of time, you rotate off.
Man, because I didn't want to break the law while they was behind.
And I think when I also talked about Jericho, of course, I'm on the steering committee for the Jericho Amnesty Movement for recognition and release of political prisoners and prisoners of war in the United States. My sister has since passed away, returned to Allah, Sister Shafia Bakari, along with Brother Herman Ferguson, who's also made the transition, and Jalil Montague, who still is a BLA prisoner in New York, who's up for parole now. They were the co-founders of the Jericho Amnesty Movement. It started off, it was going to be a march, and I think for a lot of us, you know, our understanding it would be a short-term organizational thing, but it went on to more or less become a permanent structure. And it's involved in a lot of campaigns around prisoners' medical conditions, legal conditions, and people should check out that website, which a lot of times can help lead them to the websites of people's individual campaigns. It's also suggestions on how they can help both particular prisoners and the movement to gain recognition and release of political prisoners in general.
That's called the Jericho Movement.org, right, or something like that.
Yeah, yep.
All right. All right. Is there anything else? Any other prisoners you want to make special note of? Their conditions? Or?
Well, okay. I'm a Muslim, and actually, I'm part of Masai al-Kaaba. My imam, well, actually, the man formerly known as Jeff Ford, he's one of the prisoners being held in the Supermax in Florence, Colorado. I think, folks could try dropping him a line. Frequently, his communications is shut down. But he would be one of the people I would mention. We're trying to work, to help him with his medical condition, and then also doing some work trying to get him released from Florence. Ultimately, we'd like to get him released and onto the street. But for now,
at least out of Florence.
At least out of Florence. And again, he's been there longer than many prisoners. Him and brother Larry Hoover, who, if people look at the cases and the history, you see, they were doing a tremendous amount of work on the streets, even from inside. And I'd like to mention them, and like I said, for people to check out their stories and aid and assist any way they can with them, along with other prisoners who are building held in places like Florence. I'd have to mention Brother Malmim Kabir. Brother Malmim he raised in court that he was a citizen of the Republic of North Africa. He's in prison for one of them cases, I guess they call the El Rukin case. They were supposedly trying to commit terrorist activity for Libya, and Malmim was he didn't go into their system immediately. They were looking for him for several years. They put him on one of their terrorist lists. Malmim was actually captured in my house. And at that time, he again raised the fact that he was a citizen of the Republic of North Africa. He has severe health problems. He has chronic obstruction pulmonary disease.
COPD?
He has COPD very bad. He went in good health, like a lot of people.
Yeah.
He went in with good health, but right now he's in Springfield, Missouri, and primarily because that's a medical facility. We try to work on him getting a lung transplant. We'd like to see him released. Period. I mean, he should be released because the charge is bogus. But along with that is some kind of compassionate release or whatever. But at various times, he's been told maybe 2 years, 3 years, maybe less. He's developed some infections around within the lungs. But Malmim Kabir, Melvin Mays, like I say, he's at Springfield, Missouri.
Okay, and just to put a pin in it, we know of at least 2 prisoners, I guess they're in the federal system, who have actually been made parole, and the system refused to release them. I'm speaking of the Veronza Bowers and Dr. Matulu Shakur. Do you have any comment on this? How is this happening under their system?
Well, if I speak to Veronza first, it's that's kind of like I mean,
what you gonna do about it?
Yeah, and actually, that's what the system is telling. Because you're right, he made it, and they're not really giving a reason. They're doing what they want to do. Matulu, it is constant work on his, and again, Matulu actually I might see being out before Veronza. But again, I can't say because Matulu's legal work sometimes go back and forth. Not in the sense of anything
Veronza's
he
been
did.
Fighting it longer.
But Veronza's
14 years.
He's been fighting it longer, but it's like Veronza, they're just hogging. I don't even know whether I consider they're doing anything to justify. I mean, because we're glad and I know you was just saying them two, but people need to look at them. But it's also then we look at people like glad that there's finally some movement around the move prisoners,
Right.
which is that's a whole travesty and stuff. Again, that goes back into what I was saying earlier about taking away whole generations of people. And even though they took away them inside, it's like the children on the outside and the rest of it, like have came along beautiful personalities, especially all things considered.
I know Mike, he's 40 years old now.
He's 40
just not getting out of prison.
And
It's unbelievable.
He finally, to see his mother, and he's a beautiful person.
Yeah, I seen him in a rap group 20 years ago. He had a move rap group.
Okay. And one more person I should mention, and that's Sundiata Kohli.
Oh, absolutely.
Sundi's up there in the 80s. Sundiata is one of the kindest people you could ever meet. Sundiata Kohli, for those who don't know, he was a brother at the same time that they shot Assata Shakur and killed Zaid Malik Shakur. Sundiata was captured. He's been locked up. He's also a state prisoner, but he's under the custody of the federal prison. People need to write him, talk to him. He also has some readings out there. And I should say, with all the people I mentioned, please don't write with super radical stuff. Because it's not like they can respond in certain ways, and any way they respond sometimes can set them up. Write to them as people. Anything, whichever way they want the conversation to lead, they'll let you know. But, get in touch with them and see what you can do with helping their campaign. But Sundiata is a beautiful person. He aided and assisted many prisoners. And again, the more I say about Sundiata, it might just help them keep him inside. So I just say y'all need to get in touch with him. He's really up there in age.
He's born in 1937. He's like 84.
Yeah.
Okay, I got one more question. I hope this ain't going on too long for you. As I know you could. I knew you'd be able to talk.
I don't like to talk that much. You can edit more.
Yeah, we probably will. But we've been looking at the Creed and the Declaration as foundational documents. And some of the younger comrades, have a problem with the whole idea of deaf, dumb, and blind in the Creed. What, if anything, would you change about either document?
Offhand, right now, I can't say specifically what I would change. I know, like, the deaf, dumb, and blind is like, I understood, like, in a context of the time and what was meant. It's and I don't know whether I can pass that on to somebody else, so I can't say that they're wrong. And even if I try to explain it in some context, it wouldn't come out right. But I wouldn't. But along with a lot of the documents, I do think even when people think about changing, I think they really need to look at, like, everything involved, why it was done a particular way at a particular time, and how it was seen as relevant now. And the provisional government itself, even when people think of it, because it wasn't an organization, it was supposed to be representing like a provisional government of various movements and people. And so a lot of stuff was very carefully balanced. What we've seen lately is that, like, well, not just lately, but in recent years, it's like different forces come up because they understand things a certain way. And a lot of times it's not necessarily a thing where they're working with other formations. That's the way they think that certain things should be said or expressed a certain way, which might be cool for them, but it can throw off the whole balance. One of the things the provisional government actually was supposed to do is one of the things probably is still necessary now. And that's for folks actually to be in that room and talk with each other. Not the Facebook thing about what they don't like, or not the public denunciations of each other, but actually get together with a spirit of unity and listen to each other. Because I'm also one of the ones, I don't think that people need to be putting out statements every week about what they like and don't like, especially when we talk about things like provisional government, or when we talk about things that's supposed to be broad-based movement. Because we got to remember that everybody don't see things the same way. There's a lot of issues I could think of. As a Muslim, I would disagree with certain things. And I'm not saying I would ever throw away anything or compromise my principles, but I do know that when I'm working with somebody else, the language I may use may be, like, not as hard as it would be as if I was talking to a body of Muslims. Like I said, for me, I know, like, first and foremost is Allah. if everybody ain't a Muslim. So if I thought there was, then I'm mistaken. And if everybody was, then for me it wouldn't be problems. And I got to understand that whatever I believe in, many other people believe in what they believe in just as strongly. And that's, again, so when the provisional government was founded, there were various forces involved. Some more cultural nationalists than revolutionary nationalists, some very narrow nationalists. So that's what I think people need to think about when they talk about the words. But a lot of times it's also, I'll go back to that thing about doing certain work and then seeing how things come out. Like we was talking about earlier, we need to develop institutions on the land. We need things like the housing co-ops, the food co-ops, the development of people assemblies. I do see some things as having more value and possibilities when we talk about doing it actually on the national territory. And a lot of times that's going to tend to be some of the more areas, rural areas. I see more things on the possibility, like maybe in Mississippi, some parts of Mississippi, than I may see in a place like Atlanta, Georgia. I don't think we need to be concentrating on trying to win folks over in certain areas that are hard or more into that large assimilationist mentality. When we have people in those areas that are looking for help in organizing and developing certain things where, we can develop as New Africans. But that's why I think, again, in the process of working, certain language that we use may change, will change, but it's going to be because we're actually working with people and not trying to push more or less our organizational views on people without any practice. So when you say some of the young activists, yeah, it's cool and we respect what they do, but a lot of times it's not that they've actually been engaged with struggle with the people. And struggle is more than slogans, it's Facebook. It's really helping us, those New African elders, which a lot of them didn't start off elders. It's like, really working with them. How do we save this property from the tax assessor? How do we help you, restore the houses that you have that's falling apart? What's the needs you have? As a New African, what can we sit there and learn from you about what you went through? How can we help you plow the fields and all that? Not that we bring to them a bunch of the rhetoric and so and language that they, not because they're stupid, but they don't understand where you context you putting it in. In many cases, we don't understand it. But again, we're not developing institutions. We're not developing the housing. So that's where I think a lot of times we need to be. And that would be one of the differences sometimes when we look at some of the people who originally involved with both the founding of the PG or even some of the other movements on the ground. They actually work with people. When you're talking about RAM, when you're talking about groups like the Deacons for Defense, it ain't like they weren't related to armed struggle, but they actually came from and was working with the people. When you're talking about SNCC, that went from that Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee to the Student National. But when people like Imam Jamil Amin, who was Rap Brown, Kwame Ture, who was Stokely Carmichael, Mikasa Dada, who was Willie Ricks, they actually engaged in the struggle with the people in the land and the territory and developed philosophies. And even though in many ways they went slightly separate paths later, and for those who are alive or even then, they had mutual respect for each other. They started off with a grounding with the work in the people, organizing around voter registration, getting shot at, and I think, again, sometimes that's lacking with some of the younger ones. And I ain't into constantly the murder mouthing of the police and yeah. But again, not working on development. If they talking about independence, that is. If they talking about something else, then it becomes something different. But they still got to win the hearts and minds of the people, and that's usually through work. And one final formation I didn't mention, a lot of times people do tend to mention them, even when you look at like the Black Panther Party. I mean, it was people actually, it wasn't like there was one solid core group. I mean, because even people who got involved with that actually came from, they had different philosophical outlooks, ideological outlooks. I mean, some of that we found out later, but they united around certain conditions and issues. So when they did certain things, they also had stuff like the breakfast program. They talked about armed self-defense, and some related to that more so than others in armed offensive action. But they had things like the breakfast program. They had things like after-school program. So when they talked to people about socialism, they gave some examples of what they was talking about. So it helped the people understand more about who. When you say Mao, when you say Malcolm, when you say Che Guevara, you know, it's like people got an idea of like what they might have been about, because you're saying like this is what you relate to. And in the process of people working together with all them different ideological outlooks and political outlooks, they also learned more about each other, which is why people had to get killed by the state.
All right. Well, that was pretty good, brother. You got anything else you want to say?
No.
What?
I have some stuff I want to take back.
What? I have stuff you want to take back? Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. It's always a pleasure. I'm in the wonderful city of Chicago, so.